A letter I'll never send to my wife about why we never truly understood each other. I wrote this recently, trying to understand what went wrong. It's not something I'll send, but maybe it helps someone else feel less alone. I hope it means something to someone or helps them feel seen. The Tree and the Bowl. To my wife. One of the biggest reasons it has always been so difficult for us to truly get along is because we see the world completely differently. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. There are billions of people on this earth, and countless more who have ever lived, each one their own person, living a life that could never be exactly replicated. Even the weather sometimes matters. Everything matters. And so we are different. From what I understand, you move through the world with your eyes closed, feeling everything, making your decisions based on the feeling that rises inside you. It's not about me. It's about what something makes you feel, and your body seems trained to believe you are about to be hurt. You brace for it. You have always braced for it. In the beginning, you were scared. Later, you became reluctant. Then you told me that you simply wanted to oppress people, and you thought I was making you submissive, because that's what you believed I desired. After that, it became hate. The fundamental problem between us is that you often develop strong feelings before sentences are even finished. It means you are not reacting to what I say. You are reacting to the feeling you already had. And over time, those feelings that once sometimes softened, now only sharpen. They go from bad to worse. At our core, we are different. When you speak, I try to listen to everything, to blend it all together, like ingredients in a chili. Each one matters. Each flavor influences the whole. I try not to add emotions that aren't already there. I try to experience what is, before deciding what it means. But you feel early, quickly, deeply. And when you feel something, it becomes immovable. It becomes reality. You truly believe I want to suppress your voice, when I only ever wish to quiet it, to soothe it. The two things are not the same. I live inside the moment, inside the totality of what is being said. And I haven't always been good at it, but I have always tried. Now, I'm simply better at it. I don't think my way of being is better than yours. In fact, I believe your way is deeply important for human survival. Feeling so quickly, so intensely, it protected us once. I only wish whatever happened to you hadn't left you trapped in survival mode. Because you were already living inside it when I met you. You've told me so, not in those words, but through the stories you shared, the way you flinched from life. And the pain you carry, it is not your fault. It's like having a fever, not something you chose, but something your body had to do in order to survive what was happening to it. I have never judged you for this. I could never judge anyone for surviving. You say I am emotionless. But I feel everything. I just do not become what I feel. You feel a wave and ride it, and it carries you where it will. I feel a wind pass through my leaves. And when the wind is gone, I am still. There is nothing wrong with either way of being. I only wish you had been given a bowl filled with love before I ever found you. Because if you had, I would have made it overflow for the rest of your life. But now, somehow, I can't even convince you that I ever tried. Let me analyze this story for you. This piece, The Tree and the Bowl, reads like a love letter never sent, but also like a quiet elegy for a relationship that collapsed under the weight of emotional misalignment. It's haunting, introspective, and composed with restraint that makes the hurt even sharper. It's not a confession or a plea, it's a final sorting of emotional truths after years of trying to bridge an unbridgeable gap. And like all stories of emotional disconnection between two people who once loved each other, it is devastating in its stillness. At its core, this is a story of incompatible emotional languages. The narrator lays out the difference with metaphor and clarity. One partner moves through the world as a tree, steady, rooted, reacting slowly and with intention. The other is like a wave, emotional and immediate, experiencing the world through sensations that strike and stick before thought can intervene. These aren't framed as faults, just truths. The narrator is not bitter, just tired and mournfully aware that their attempts to connect were never perceived as connection. What makes the story powerful is its compassion. There is no attempt to villainize the wife, even as the narrator acknowledges the pain she caused. In fact, he seems to understand why she hurt him. She lives in survival mode, flinching from life, expecting pain even in safe moments. Her emotions arrive fully formed, often before words do. And though this frustrates him, though it likely destroyed the relationship, he still writes, "I have never judged you for this. I could never judge anyone for surviving." That line alone is enough to crack your chest open. This is not a story about blame. It's about misunderstanding, deep, persistent, gut-level misunderstanding. The narrator tried to communicate, tried to listen to every flavor in the chili, tried to be still and rational and gentle. But the partner did not experience that as love. She experienced it as suppression, as coldness, as emotional distance. Her nervous system, honed by trauma or early damage, perceived even gentleness as a threat. And over time, that misreading hardened into resentment, then rejection, then hate. The narrator's heartbreak is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, tired, suffused with a kind of grief that comes only after you've accepted there's nothing else you can say to be understood. The most painful line might be, "I only wish you had been given a bowl filled with love before I ever found you. Because if you had, I would have made it overflow for the rest of your life." There is no anger in that. Only longing. He is not angry that she was broken, he's devastated that she couldn't accept his love because of the break someone else gave her. It's a story about the limits of love. About how love can try and still fail when people speak different emotional dialects. The narrator didn't lack affection. He lacked access to her feelings, to her perceptions, to the place inside her that could believe in calm. This kind of misalignment is tragic because it isn't anyone's fault. It's two lives colliding at the wrong angles. One person finds meaning in stillness. The other finds survival in intensity. Neither is wrong. Neither is right. But together, they destroy each other, not violently, but slowly, through misunderstanding, mistrust, and the feeling of being invisible even while trying your hardest to be seen. Stylistically, the writing is elegant but raw. The metaphors, the tree, the bull, the chile, the wave, are grounded and beautiful, never overreaching. They carry emotional weight without melodrama. The piece reads like someone who has spent years trying to put words to what went wrong, and finally found a way to do it that doesn't attack, but still tells the truth. And maybe that's what this piece is really about, the loneliness of loving someone who doesn't experience the world the way you do, and the quiet dignity of letting them go when you realize your love can't reach them, not because it wasn't enough, but because they never had a place to hold it. This isn't a letter. It's a farewell. And a gentle one. I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day. Pretty much the title. My spouse, 26, and I, 27, got married earlier this year, hooray. The ceremony was extremely small and personal and it was all we could ask for. Unfortunately, this is where the good times, with the family, not my spouse, ended. Here's some backstory. My spouse's brother, referred to as Steve in the rest of the post, is 32 years old. He was a delivery driver for years until he unexpectedly quit. He was in and out of jobs for a couple of years until landing a DoorDash gig. No shade to any job, money is money at the end of the day. Steve knew about the trip for at least 4 months, he lives at home with his parents, and has little to no bills. Despite all of this, Steve did not save any money for the trip and admitted to spending his money on vapes and weed. In fact, Steve began the trip bragging that his bank account balance was $25 in the negative. This will be relevant later. Here's what happened. Our wedding was in a tourist location known for various liquor and wine tastings. The night before our ceremony, my mother-in-law, family friend, spouse, and I went on a bar crawl. Safe to say we all were pleasantly intoxicated, not enough to be a nuisance, but enough to stumble back to our hotel. Notably absent from this night out was my spouse's brother, 32, Steve. The next day, the day of the wedding, as I mentioned, went swimmingly until the evening. In celebration of our nuptials we decided as a family that it was booze cruise night too. The original entourage, MIL, family friend, spouse, myself, was joined by my new brother-in-law, Steve. It is important to note that Steve had zero money to his name and since drinking costs money, he was freeloading on this booze cruise. The original group did not drink as heavily this time, we were sufficiently buzzed, but not stumbling drunk. We decided to cut ourselves off, as responsible drinkers do, and this is where the night began to turn. It was when we decided to cease drinking, that Steve grew grumpy. He moaned, "I wish I would have been there the first night, only, he was there, he chose not to tag along because, tourist towns suck." Steve then tried to pressure the rest of us to continue drinking. After continuous refusals, we convinced Steve it was time for dinner and a nightcap. We were seated at the restaurant. We all ordered water and then we had our individual drink orders. I ordered a glass of wine, my spouse ordered a cocktail, and Steve ordered a shot of Jack Daniels and a beer. Reminder, he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab. When our waters arrived, my spouse shot a paper straw wrapper at Steve, then Steve returned the favor. Then our specialty drinks arrived, my spouse then grabbed the extra straw that came with their drink and shot an additional wrapper at Steve. All hell broke loose. Steve yelled, "If I can't get you back, then you can't shoot me with a straw wrapper." He then downed the Jack Daniels, aggressively threw the glass across the table and into the appetizer trays. Fortunately, nothing broke, but the noise brought the entire world to a standstill. Steve stormed off, and that was the last we saw of him that night. You would think this is where the story ends, but my spouse and I caught up with Emil the next morning and she filled us in on what transpired. The rest is per Emil's recollection when we grabbed breakfast at 8 a.m. the next day. Apparently, before the booze cruise, Emil gave Steve petty cash for knickknacks and drinks so that he could pay for things himself. Remember, Steve didn't pay for a single tasting. So, what did he do with the money he squirreled away? Well, after Steve stormed out of the restaurant, he drank himself into oblivion. He was so inebriated that my Emil received a call at 3 in the morning from a local bar telling her to pick up Steve before they called the cops. My Emil then got out of bed, woke up my FAL who has ailing health and mobility issues, picked Steve up and headed back to the hotel. However, as they were nearing the hotel, Steve escaped. We don't know whether he jumped out of the car or fled from the bar on foot. Nevertheless, he ran down an alley, rolled his ankle, lost his shoes and his phone. He was then coaxed back into the car and finally put to bed at 4 in the morning. The next day he left and my spouse and I have refused to talk to him ever since. A week later my spouse received an apology text from Steve in which he stated that he was blackout drunk at the restaurant. I doubt this as there were no other signs of that level of drunkenness, and he regretted his actions. He also stated that his biggest regret was not ruining our wedding night, but yelling at his mom. While both are awful, his need to include that in his apology made the whole message ring hollow. We have not replied to him since. TLDR, on the night of my wedding, my BIL got drunk, made a fool of himself and ruined the mood of what was supposed to be a wonderful night. Let me analyze this story for you. This story, I hate my brother-in-law for what he did on my wedding day, is, on the surface, about an intoxicated and immature man disrupting a meaningful night. But just under the surface, it's about something deeper, the pain of watching someone willfully choose self-destruction and drag others down with them and doing it on the one night that was supposed to be untouchable. At its core, this is a story of betrayal and resentment disguised as party chaos. Steve is not just a bad guest. He is a ticking bomb of entitlement, arrested development, and unresolved frustration, and the narrator makes it clear from the beginning, this wasn't a sudden meltdown. This was a long time coming. The night of the wedding just gave him the stage. Let's unpack this. Steve is 32, older than everyone else involved, yet shows the least maturity. He had months of notice about the trip, zero major responsibilities, and still showed up flat broke, not even a token attempt to participate like an adult. That's not harmless, that's passive exploitation, banking on others to carry him without consequence. His refusal to join the group on the first night, then sulking that he wasn't part of it, reveals the deep entitlement and martyrdom that define his personality. He wants inclusion without effort, reward without engagement. When the group stops drinking, he doesn't just get moody, he gets manipulative. His push to keep the party going wasn't about fun. It was about control. He didn't like that others were calling it a night because it reminded him that he wasn't the center of the experience. The straw wrapper incident wasn't the cause of the outburst, it was the excuse. The pressure had already been building, and that moment gave him the perfect justification to turn a petty grievance into a public tantrum. His outburst, slamming a glass across the table, storming off, wasn't about straws. It was about resentment and humiliation at not being the one everyone was orbiting. This story is also about grief. Not of death, but of hope. Weddings aren't just rituals, they're emotional tipping points. They don't just add someone new to the family, they expose everything that's already wrong. And here, the narrator is realizing, this man is not just inconsiderate, he is incapable of being part of their future. The details that follow, the 3 a.m. rescue call, the drunken escape, the injury, the lost phone, the parents dragged from bed to handle their grown son, these aren't funny anymore. They're tragic. The way Steve's self-destruction forces his aging, ill father to get up and help him like a toddler shows just how corrosive his behavior is. He doesn't just hurt himself, he bleeds into everyone else's peace. And perhaps the most quietly painful piece of the story, Steve's apology. "I was blackout drunk" is a dodge. The narrator doesn't believe it, and neither do we. His biggest regret being that he yelled at his mom, not the people whose wedding he disrupted, is telling. Even in apology, Steve centers himself and his selective guilt. It's a selfish confession dressed as remorse. The narrator and their spouse's decision to go no contact after the text isn't vindictive. It's protective. Not out of hate, but out of love for each other, and a need to keep their future safe from someone who will always find a way to ruin the moment. Stylistically, the story is told with rising tension and pointed detail. It begins with humor and a casual tone, but that tone shifts expertly as the events spiral out. The narrator uses light sarcasm and parentheticals, reminder he was ordering these drinks on my spouse's tab, to emphasize the absurdity, but by the time we reach the 3 a.m. bar call, the mood has turned. What began as a cringy family anecdote has morphed into a portrait of a family hostage to one man's immaturity. This is a story about the final straw, both literal and metaphorical. A wedding night ruined by a grown child in a man's body. And a newlywed couple who now realize that some people do not deserve second chances just because they share blood. This isn't a tantrum, it's a boundary. And it's about time. Just ran away from a Grindr hookup, I'm scared. Hi, I've never posted anything here, this just happened like 20 minutes ago and I'm honestly shaking and I just want to vent and hear some opinions. So I, 24M, was looking for hookups on Grindr. I know, bad idea to start, when an account that had already talked to me at least 5 other times said hello, the other messages were all the same, I just never responded. BC, I wasn't really attracted to him by his PP, he looked like 40 and I usually don't hook up with people that far from my age, and id why, but this time I responded. The conversation was pretty straightforward. His profile already said that he was looking for a hookup, that he liked feminine young men, preferably hairless or shaved, and that were down to use female lingerie. I don't meet those standards lol, but I replied anyway. He said he liked femboys, but nothing about body hair or lingerie on the chat, I'm just young and a bottom lol. We arranged IR pretty quick, which is kind of a red flag now that I think about it. He had a white windowless van, another red flag, that we could use somewhere private outside the city. My city is small and has big farmlands around, so those surrounding areas are pretty empty. We exchanged photos and I actually liked what I saw, cause it wasn't that he was ugly, it was mostly about the age thing, but I was into it now. I told him the street where I live, but told him to meet me a couple of blocks away from my house for security reasons. Now is when it gets scary for me. When he arrived, I tried to look at the license plate but couldn't really cause he parked kinda fast in front of me and opened the door. But he didn't really look like the picture, he looked a bit older and skinnier, so I hesitated a little but was already with my foot in there. He looked at me and said, hurry up, someone could see, which isn't really that weird in the Grindr hookup world, but scared me a little more. Now get mad at me, I still entered the van. Id why really? I know I have a really big problem saying no to most stuff, but this was scaring me from the moment he arrived and I still went inside SMH. Once there, he said he didn't have condoms so we went to a gas station literally a block away, and I was so freaked out already, my mind was running in circles trying to make up an excuse or just how to tell him I wasn't interested anymore, but when we arrived at the station, I had an idea. He left the keys in and went inside. I was afraid he would catch me running away midway through so I waited until it was his turn so he would be distracted. Once the cashier started talking to him I opened the door, left it semi-closed to not make a sound and just ran. I was like 4 blocks from my house but the surrounding streets of the gas station are big open avenues, and I wanted to be in a much more private enclosed area so he couldn't find me that easily. I tried to use alleyways and look at every direction all the time to see if he was following me, cause I didn't want him to find where I live. I must have looked insane lol. When I was just getting to my apartment I saw a white van passing by, but if it was him or not, I hid. Now I'm here, writing this, still scared. I know I was an asshole for leaving the van with the keys on and everything but I was really panicking. I don't know what to do now. I blocked his profile on Grindr, and actually I don't think I'm gonna use it for a while. Thank you if you read it all, and thanks in advance for your replies. Let me analyze this story for you. This story, just ran away from a Grindr hookup, I'm scared, is a raw, vulnerable account of survival instinct clashing with the paralyzing fear of confrontation. It's not just about a bad hookup. It's about what happens when boundaries are blurred, gut feelings are ignored, and someone finds themselves on the edge of something that could have gone very, very wrong. At its core, this is a story about a near miss with danger and how hard it is to say no, even when everything in your body is screaming that you should. The emotional architecture of the story, fear, shame, and clarity. From the first paragraph, we know the narrator is shaken. I'm honestly shaking, they write. This isn't a story of embarrassment. It's a story of fear, the kind that comes when the social norms and politeness we're trained to follow suddenly put us in danger. The narrator knows all the red flags. A white, windowless van. A hookup outside of town, away from anyone who might intervene. A man older than he appeared in photos. Rushing the narrator into the vehicle, literally saying, hurry up, someone could see. These are not subtle signs. But the narrator's response is not uncommon, they override their intuition out of politeness, pressure, and habit. They admit, I know I have a really big problem saying no. This is a quiet tragedy for so many people, especially queer men navigating a world of hypersexualized, low-commitment spaces like Grindr, where consent is often assumed, and hesitation is frowned upon. The turning point is not the van. It's the gas station. By the time they're in the van, it's too late to pretend it's casual. This isn't about sex anymore. It's about escape. And that's where the most important part of the story happens. The narrator doesn't freeze. They strategize. They wait. They watch for the moment of distraction, and they run. This is a survival story. It might not involve violence, but it involves the exact same instinct: find the door, find the exit, get to safety. And they do. Barefoot in a mental sense, but running for their life. What's unspoken but present? This wasn't just creepy. It could have been catastrophic. He didn't look like his photos. That alone isn't a crime, but it's often a sign of deliberate deception. He rushed the narrator, pressured them to enter the van immediately. The hookup was to take place outside the city, in isolated farmland, with no condoms, and a stranger behind the wheel. This setup has every hallmark of a potential assault, or worse. The narrator might be minimizing it, maybe I overreacted, but every instinct they followed was correct. This story is also about shame, but not the kind it should be. The narrator says, I know I was an asshole for leaving the van with the keys on and everything. No. You were not. You were terrified and had every reason to be. That van is not your responsibility. Your safety is. There's a broader, sadder commentary here about how queer men, especially young ones, are often expected to navigate dangerous situations with grace, humor, and zero pushback. The narrator apologizes to a stranger who put them in danger. That's the legacy of a culture that still teaches queer people their safety is secondary to someone else's expectations. Stylistically, the story is urgent and confessional. It's written like a breathless recounting, full of spiraling thoughts and self-checks, mirroring the mental fog and adrenaline of a traumatic experience. This makes the story feel real, close, and heartbreaking. The tone moves from disbelief, to fear, to guilt, to relief, but not resolution. The narrator made it out, but they are not okay yet. This story is not about a Grindr hookup gone wrong. It's about someone learning the cost of silence, and the power of listening to fear. It's a warning. Not just about creeps and vans, but about the way people can train themselves to ignore their own alarm bells out of politeness, validation seeking, or inexperience. And most of all, it's a reminder. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to run. You are allowed to choose survival over explanation. This narrator did. And they're here to tell the story. If you'd like, I can help you craft a version of this story as a personal essay, or a public post that raises awareness. It's powerful, and you told it with courage. My parents took me out of school in 2nd grade, and I'll never forgive them for what they took from me. When I was in 2nd grade, I was thriving. Teachers told my parents I was ahead of my grade in reading, in math, in everything. I was a bright kid with a future. I loved learning. I was doing well. I was happy. Then they ripped it all away. They pulled me out of school and said they were going to homeschool me. But they didn't. Not really. What they did was lock me in a house and feed me religion. That's it. No math. No writing. No science. No guidance. Nothing. I was 8 or 9 years old, and that was the last time I got a real education. From that point on, I wasn't allowed to leave the house alone. Not to go outside, not to meet friends, not even to walk around the block. I was only allowed out if I was with them, and even then, it was just to places like the grocery store. That was my entire life for almost a decade. I was completely cut off from the world. I didn't have friends. I didn't have school. I didn't even know how to talk to people my own age. All I had was the internet. I'd sit on Discord just listening to people talk and laugh and have fun, wishing I could join in but too scared to speak. I didn't know how. I'd watch YouTubers hanging out with their friends, going to dinner, seeing movies, living normal lives, and I'd cry wondering what that felt like. We never went to restaurants. Never had real celebrations. Never made memories. I was just there. A kid trapped in a house, wasting away while the world passed me by. I used to think they were protecting me. That they loved me. That they were just strict because they cared. But now I know the truth. They didn't care. Or if they did, they cared in the worst, most damaging way possible. They destroyed me. When I turned 18, I finally got a job. I started paying bills. I still lived in the house for a bit, but everything changed once I had money. Suddenly I had a little freedom. But the damage was already done. Today, I make $29 an hour. I work hard. I'm trying to build a life. But I still struggle every single day. My brain is behind. I can't pick up on simple things at work, sometimes basic instructions, stuff other people get right away. Socially, I still feel like I'm faking it, like I'm copying other people just to get by. Because I never got to learn those things when I was supposed to. Sometimes it feels like I don't even know who I am. It kills me. Every single day I wonder who I could have been if they hadn't done this to me. I was smart. I was going somewhere. And they stopped me. They chose to stop me. I'm furious. I'll never forgive them. I'll never understand what the hell they were thinking. What was their plan? What did they think would happen? That I'd magically be okay after being locked away for over a decade? They stole my future. They stole my childhood. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Now I look at my newborn son and my hopefully one day to be wife, and I wonder if I'll ever be enough for them. She tells me I already am. That I'm more than enough. But deep down, I'm scared I'll never be able to give them the life they truly deserve. I know I'd never do to my son what was done to me. I'll make sure he knows how important education is. I just hope I can be the father he needs, but I'm scared I'll never live up to his expectations. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a profound and heartbreaking account of a life derailed not by fate or accident, but by the willful choices of those meant to nurture and protect. It begins with a child full of promise, intelligence, and curiosity, thriving in the second grade, praised by teachers, clearly on a path toward growth and achievement. There's no ambiguity in those early moments. The narrator was doing well, happy, eager to learn, socially and intellectually alive. And then, in one fateful decision, everything changed. Their parents pulled them out of school under the guise of homeschooling, but what followed wasn't education in any form. It was neglect masquerading as piety, control justified by faith. They were cut off, not just from school, but from the world itself. No social contact, no outings beyond errands under supervision, no friends, no birthdays, no joy. The isolation wasn't incidental, it was engineered. And it didn't last weeks or months. It lasted years. The emotional tone of the story is complex, shaped by sorrow, disbelief, buried trauma, and deep, abiding rage. This isn't the kind of hurt that heals with time, it's the kind that calcifies, becomes part of the bones. The narrator doesn't just mourn what was taken, they are haunted by the person they might have become. Because what was stolen wasn't just knowledge, it was language, it was freedom, it was identity. They weren't just denied books and lessons, they were denied the mirror of peers, the rituals of growth, the thousand small interactions that teach a child how to be a person. Locked in a house, fed a single worldview, denied even the simple pleasure of walking around the block, what was once a curious child was effectively shuttered away from humanity. The scars are everywhere. The narrator describes the constant effort required just to function in a world they were never prepared for. At work, they struggled to absorb instructions others take for granted. In conversation, they mimic the rhythms and words of people around them, performing normalcy rather than living it. Their sense of self remains fractured. The emotional cost of their parents' decision is incalculable, not just in opportunities lost, but in basic self-trust, in the ability to believe they are capable, worthy, whole. There's something especially painful about the moment when they describe watching YouTubers laugh in live, or listening to friends on Discord without speaking, because it captures what's most cruel about their upbringing. They were made to watch life from the outside, like a ghost in their own timeline. Yet for all the devastation, this story is also steeped in a quiet, reluctant hope. As much as the narrator feels broken, they are also building. They work hard. They earn a good wage. They have a partner who sees their worth, and a newborn son who represents something sacred, the chance to begin again, to rewrite the story. There's no cheap optimism here, just the complicated reality of healing while still bleeding. The narrator isn't naive about what's been lost, nor do they pretend to be free of fear. In fact, one of the most painful parts of the story is their doubt that they will be enough for their own child, that the damage they carry might limit the love they're able to give. But within that fear is a deeper truth. The fact that they are asking those questions at all is proof of their worth as a parent. They know what was done to them, and they vow, consciously, actively, with everything they have, to never repeat it. That's not just healing. That's heroism. At its core, this story is about the long, hard shadow of stolen childhood. It's about a system of control disguised as care, and about the quiet bravery it takes to claw your way back into life after being shut out for so long. But even more than that, it's about love, not the kind the narrator received, but the kind they now give. It's about the staggering courage it takes to raise a child while still raising yourself. To look into your son's eyes and promise him something you were never given: safety, freedom, respect. The narrator's journey is far from over, and their pain is still present. But so is their strength. And in telling this story, they aren't just processing the past, they're reclaiming it. They are refusing to be defined by what was done to them. And that, in the end, is a kind of freedom their parents never imagined they'd find. I feel uncomfortable about how friendly my husband and my sister have been with one another. My husband and I have been married for 2 years but together for 14. After we got married, my sister visited us often, and I feel like they've gotten very friendly in their interactions. At first, I was glad that they got along well. It makes sense, they're kind of similar in their personality and sense of humor, so it makes sense that they would click. But lately I noticed that they seem to have their own inside jokes, like we would all, me, my husband, my sister and my other siblings, be sitting together and talking, and somebody would say something that one of them thought was funny, and that person would look to the other and laugh over the joke that no one else understood. They would explain if I asked what they were laughing about, but after a few times, I just started to feel weirdly left out, like they had something special that I wasn't a part of. They would also text, and it's all just funny back and forth banter, memes, he showed me, and normal day-to-day stuff. There's nothing unusual about those texts, but it bothered me all the same. When we all eat together, he would take food from the big sharing/serving plate and give it to me. We're Chinese, but also to her, just in an offhand way, and I know he's probably just being nice and caring and not really thinking too much about it. He would tease her about stuff, which in itself should be fine because he teases everyone, it's a sense of humor, and she would reply with some witty retort or sometimes playfully kick or hit him on the arm, which she also does with me and other people, but for some reason, it bothers me when she does it to him. They're both just being themselves, doing things that I've seen them also do with other people. I know there is nothing going on, and I know they love me and would never hurt me intentionally, but I just am. I feel hurt, jealous and a little betrayed, and I hate myself for feeling like this, because it feels petty. I have brought this up with my husband, and he has explained that he's just being friendly, but that he would stop and minimize his interactions with her if I'd like, because it'd be the same to him either way, and what's most important to him is that I'm happy. He was very kind about it, but I'm hesitant to say yes, and to ask my sister to do the same, because I fear that it'll make things awkward for them, because we see our families, both mine and his, and hang out very often, but also because I can't seem to shake the idea that I'm being immature and unfair. My husband is part of the family now, so of course he will and should form relationships with other members of the family. It's not for me to dictate how other people form bonds with others, and it's ridiculous to think I can. Their texts and interactions are harmless and friendly in nature. I cannot think of a valid reason to justify asking them to change how they interact, and I feel crazy for feeling the way I do, like an excessively jealous and possessive lover. I've never thought of myself as particularly jealous and possessive, and I'm startled by how I am reacting to all this. I don't know what's become of me. I have been trying to get over it by myself, and it's been a year and it still bothers me, albeit on and off. Sometimes I would make it through a whole gathering without feeling particularly uncomfortable about their interactions. Other times I would notice something and it would trigger the same spiral in my head, like last weekend, and it's always such tiny things, too. I feel like I'm losing my mind a little and I hate myself for this. I feel like I'm going to ruin it for everyone by being like this, and I don't know what to do. Let me analyze this story for you. This story is a delicate, emotionally layered account of a woman grappling with the complex intersection of love, loyalty, insecurity, and familial bonds. On the surface, nothing overtly threatening or inappropriate has occurred. There are no secret rendezvous, no suggestive texts, no signs of betrayal in the traditional sense. And yet, beneath that calm exterior lies a growing unease that refuses to be rationalized away. The narrator's discomfort isn't about infidelity in the usual sense, but rather the quiet, ambiguous kind of closeness between her husband and her sister that seems, in moments, to exclude her. And this exclusion, subtle as it may be, cuts deep. What unfolds is not so much a confrontation with betrayal, but a confrontation with her own vulnerability, one that has crept up slowly, uninvited, and taken root in the space where trust once sat comfortably. The emotional complexity of this story lies in the narrator's self-awareness. She knows, intellectually, that there's likely nothing wrong. She knows that her husband loves her deeply, as evidenced by his immediate willingness to adjust his behavior for her sake. She knows that her sister has no malicious intent. She knows that their interactions are visible, open, even ordinary on paper, shared jokes, friendly teasing, memes. And yet, she cannot ignore the gnawing feeling that something about it all feels off, not dangerous or scandalous, just off. This discomfort isn't driven by jealousy in the traditional, possessive sense. It's something quieter, more insidious, the fear of emotional displacement. It's the subtle ache of watching two people you love form a connection that you're not entirely a part of, and not knowing what that says about your place in their lives. Her reaction is deeply human. When she observes her husband and sister share an inside joke or pass a knowing glance, it stings, not because she suspects something is happening, but because she fears she is being left out of something intimate. This fear of being left behind emotionally, of being replaceable in small, unnoticed ways, is often more destabilizing than the fear of outright betrayal. The narrator's turmoil is compounded by the fact that she knows her feelings may be irrational, which only leads to shame, self-doubt, and emotional spiraling. She criticizes herself harshly for having what she deems petty emotions, labeling herself immature, jealous, even crazy, despite the reality that emotional responses like hers are natural and often involuntary. This self-reproach makes her suffering even harder to manage, because she's not only hurt, she feels guilty for being hurt. What makes this story particularly poignant is the tension between what the narrator believes she should feel and what she actually does feel. She wants to be evolved, trusting, understanding. She wants to encourage meaningful relationships within her family. She wants to be the kind of partner who doesn't get rattled by harmless banter or physical closeness. But emotional safety is not built on ideals, it's built on felt experience. And what she feels, over and over again, is excluded. Not in big ways. Not in ways that anyone else would notice. But in small, persistent ways that wear down her sense of belonging. Importantly, her husband's response is not defensive or dismissive. He validates her feelings and offers to change his behavior, which reveals a strong foundation of empathy and commitment. But even this generous response doesn't fully resolve the narrator's dilemma because her fear is not rooted in his intentions, but in her own emotional fragility. She worries that asking him or her sister to change will come off as controlling or unreasonable, which leaves her caught in a trap. Either she tolerates a dynamic that causes her pain, or she risks alienating the two people she cares about most. That's an impossible position to be in, and it's no wonder that, after a year of trying to get over it, she still finds herself emotionally stuck. At its core, this story is about emotional boundaries and the invisible lines between closeness and discomfort. It's about the slow erosion of confidence when you feel like an outsider in your own life. It's about how hard it is to advocate for yourself when your pain isn't obvious or easily explained. And perhaps most powerfully, it's about the hidden grief of realizing that even in relationships filled with love and good intentions, emotional harm can still happen. Not because anyone is doing something wrong, but because human connections are messy, layered, and sometimes painfully misaligned. The narrator's fear of ruining it for everyone is telling. It reflects the burden she carries alone, the way she sees herself as the problem rather than someone in pain. But her story isn't one of dysfunction or delusion. It's the story of someone trying to maintain balance in a world where emotional truths don't always align neatly with facts. She isn't crazy. She isn't weak. She's simply overwhelmed by something that doesn't have a clear label. And that, too, is part of being human. The only path forward may be continued communication, not just with her husband, but with herself, to remind her that her feelings are valid, her needs are real, and it's not selfish to want to feel secure in the relationships that matter most.